Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thank you. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and welcome to the Smithsonian Associates interview series. Have you ever wondered if the thoughts you're thinking are actually yours? Well, today's Smithsonian Associates conversation might just change the way you think, literally. Our guest is Harvard historian and scientist Rebecca Lemov, who spent the last 2 decades pulling back the curtain on something most of us think we're immune to: brainwashing. Yep, brainwashing. But this is not science fiction or Cold War spy stuff, though it starts there. In The Instability of Truth, Dr. Rebecca Lemov takes us deep into the hidden archives of CIA experiments, cult psychology, secret black sites, and perhaps the most chilling battleground of all, the home screen of your phone. That's right. Rebecca Lemov uncovers how techniques once used in POW camps and radical political groups are now quietly running beneath our everyday lives, inside social media feeds, AI chatbots, and even dating apps. Emotional engineering, hyperpersuasion, algorithmic manipulation, it's all happening, and most of us don't even know it. Here's the twist. Education and intelligence, they don't protect you. They might even make you more vulnerable. In today's Smithsonian Associates interview, Rebecca Lemov opens up not only about her research, but her own story of addiction, trauma, and what it took to reclaim her mind. She also offers tools to help the rest of us do the same, and why questioning your own thoughts may be the most radical act of freedom you'll ever take. This is a gripping conversation. It's fascinating, a bit unsettling, absolutely, but urgently important. And it all starts now. I'm Paul Vogelzang. Please join me in welcoming Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Lemov. Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Lemov, so great to see you. Nice to meet you. Congratulations on this fantastic book. We're talking in advance of your Smithsonian Associates presentation. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
It's really nice to talk to you. This is such a timely subject. We will talk about The Instability of Truth, your wonderful new book, the subject of brainwashing and kind of the various forms that takes. And you write about brainwashing in your book that I thought this was really interesting. It doesn't necessarily start, brainwashing doesn't necessarily begin when someone else controls your mind. It stops when we stop questioning some of our own thoughts. And I thought, in particular, for those of us who are in our 60s, 70s, perhaps even beyond, what does it mean to keep questioning, especially in a world that's just filled with all of this persuasive, even sometimes confusing and even, masking the truth, all this digital noise that's going on out there?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. That's such a good question. And it gets to the heart of what I'm interested in, which is kind of environment that's ever more chaotic and unstable in relationship to what you think you can know, or even the structure and even almost like the texture of reality. So when I started this research line about 20 years ago, brainwashing did not seem like a timely topic. It seemed quite out of date, and people would often say, "Why are you interested in that? That sounds like such a strange thing, a relic of the Cold War. What could it have possibly to do with our lives now?" But I felt that I was already seeing this, or it seemed like a really interesting lens through which to watch the development of technology in an intimate way, because brainwashing really asks, how are we changed? And partly how do certain technological changes or destabilizations affect us in our inner lives. And one of the great scholars from the Cold War talked about one of his subjects he wrote about who had been interrogated and held in re-education camps as having undergone an inner surrender. I think that's an interesting, because we, on some level, it is something that we are participating in. And so to go back to your question, what happens at the point when you start to doubt your own thoughts?
Yeah.
Or the origin, like where did this conviction come from? Or you forget to ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
So what the short answer I have is it's helpful to cultivate something like meta awareness, or an awareness of just the awareness of something, of your own thoughts, really, which you can do through meditation, but also through there are many other ways to do it. And it's just sometimes I find that I forget to do that. You just sort of take these things for granted because they have their own persuasiveness.
I almost thought as I was reading the book that perhaps some in our audience might be a bit, not necessarily immune, but perhaps a bit more skeptical of some of the manipulation that's going on. And the buzzword of the moment seems to be algorithm. We hear that everywhere. Certainly, it kind of almost replaces some of these other terms. And you refer to kind of 20 years ago and the term of brainwashing. But I wonder, for those in our audience that have kind of lived through both eras, this era of the social media algorithm and this era of brainwashing, did you find in your research that there might be a bit more skepticism amongst those of us who have kind of a historical perspective on kind of what's going on?
I certainly think there can be, and I hear from people all the time who lived through the Cold War. Maybe they were in the military, maybe they were even held as POWs or had a relative who went through these things, and it really did affect them and make them realize that these things, that people can be changed against their will under certain highly constraining conditions. And what some of the scholarship says about that earlier period is that it's milieu control. In other words, the control of information going in and out of a situation that is the most effective at coercively persuading someone. So having lived through or even seen it in the news, or, having life experience, and even just living, I think just living more decades does give you a lot more comparative data. Sometimes I get frustrated because it seems that, and I get worried because I have a daughter, and I teach a lot of young people and interact with them. But there's such a short historical. There's just a lack of historical sensibility, um, which is just one of the conditions of youth usually. But I think also our reading of history has been constrained and fragmented and manipulated in so many ways. So having lived through it is it's a great treasure, really, that you can bring to bear on the present, because sometimes I think we assume that maybe being older will perfectly protect you, or, but that's also not true. There are new studies showing that older people are also subject to these same persuasive, technologies. So
Mhm.
I think it's both, a little bit of both.
I kind of reference this idea of age perspective. And you in the book talk about what I'll use the term susceptibility, certainly among
Mm.
those who might have experienced some trauma or addiction, and even perhaps some intelligence issues. They might be more susceptible to coercion. I wonder if you talk about some of these forces, and in particular frame it around your own experiences and what it taught you about the idea that we need to reclaim agency over what it is that we believe in, what we're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I've done a lot of thinking over the years because I've been interested in this topic for so long, and then over the last 5 to 7 years, I actually decided to put it all together in the book.
Mm.
But when I ask myself what led me to this topic, which has its dark aspects,
Mhm.
one of the discoveries I made is that a precondition for brainwashing, aside from the major factors that many scholars identify, is something I call ungrounding. And this can be accelerated or produced by trauma and addiction. And these are things I became more aware of recently. I think just seeing the patterns of this, and in my own life, I guess initially I saw more maybe lighthearted examples where I remember back to graduate school where I was, that graduate school is a time of great change, and you're thinking about the person you want to become. You're in a new circumstance. You're often in a new school or location, learning a ton of things, cramming books. But I found myself absorbing and expressing opinions. And one day I surprised myself by saying, I was walking down the street with a friend, and I saw a person walking a dog, and I exclaimed with great conviction, "I hate small dogs." And I didn't know that I don't actually love all dogs, but for
Yeah.
some reason I had absorbed this opinion that a person such as the person I aspired to be would have that opinion. I even surprised myself with the
Uh-huh.
vociferousness of the opinion. So it was, and then, I saw other ways that my thinking and ways of expression were being affected. And you could say, well, that's just part of how you're being trained. I think also darker experiences I had of falling into an addiction and falling into a coercively controlling relationship when I was younger, although, really, really painful, taught me that I myself was not immune. No matter, even if each step I took seemed to make sense. I had within a couple of years, I found myself like stuck in a really dark situation from which I might, I felt, looking back, I might not have gotten out. And I saw that, self-proclaimed intelligence or thinking that you're doing the right thing, or even, one's usual gauges of trust are not sufficient to stop this from happening. And I felt very fortunate to have found a way out of that, because it really creates a mental prison and a kind of slavery to a situation that you feel you can't control. So I got interested in brainwashing, I guess, also for personal reasons. And I started to see that this, we become addicted in small and large ways to a certain kind of rest or oblivion that, say, a technology can provide. A little bit of checking out, but a little bit of checking out can lead to a lot of it. And I think I still find that looking at myself, I don't ever count myself out of this research. I can actually look at myself to see how I'm interacting and when I'm getting out of balance and things like that, which is an interesting part of the research.
Yes, a fascinating part. I'm a solopreneur, so I try to make use of technology, but I also feel like I'm susceptible too. And I know from your reading, or excuse me, I know from your writing, your research, that there is a great deal of this emotional engineering that's taking place through things like personalized AI and targeted content. I feel it myself. Even though I might be subtly influenced, what do I need to be aware of in order to, kind of push back a little bit and recognize when I'm being influenced?
Well, I think it would be nice if one could just say, cut out, this particular thing. But it's never so simple. I think that some people do try to go off the grid and things like that, but
Right.
it's more like understanding the relationship. And I think there can be clues that you're out of balance. Sometimes people around you. So listen. So the other day, my daughter, I think it was over the summer, my daughter she said, you're looking at Instagram a lot to me in an accusatory way. And I was like, not me. I mean, this is my research, or I
Yeah,
had
right,
something. But when I
right.
thought about it, I really was I had kind of gotten sucked in, and I stopped for a while. It's useful to be willing to listen to the opinions of others, not exclusively, or not, just to take them into account. Because sometimes we protect an area of vulnerability or of checking out or dissociative states. And actually, a lot of the research about brainwashing has to do with dissociation and how common it is and how it can be built in very small doses to our everyday behavior. So I think also, you know, using using your strengths as well as your weak points. So if you love history, and you've lived a number of you've been fortunate enough to live a number of decades, or even be retired, to reflect on that is and to try to see what changes you've experienced and sort of measure them, even at not just the intellectual level, but almost at a physical level, like what makes you react, what makes you remember, what do you make connections with in the past, things like that are really valuable. So I guess I would also say an attitude of curiosity about it rather than condemnation or self disgust, like "Ugh, or even hopelessness, like there's no way I could ever quit this.
How do I break free from Reddit? I think is pretty much my refrain. Some mornings I get caught up in
Exactly.
that.
Like if you find you're using it first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
that's a sign. That could be a sign to like create a little, but also to be compassionate with yourself because these devices are designed to create that looping effects. And so anyway, to experiment and also have an experimental attitude, like what's it like if I don't do that for a month?
Yeah, this idea of free will, you talk about it. You have this really very nice way of putting it. It's a very powerful way of putting it. You say free will is limited, and therefore it's to be treasured. I think for those of us in kind of a later stage of life, we do need to understand this idea of treasured free will. What advice do you give to those of us to really, you know, seize that?
Mm. Uh, I think that we yeah, I guess one of the discoveries of my research is just that we're a lot less free.
Mm.
My dissertation, we're a lot less free than we think or than we're told. We have a kind of ideological commitment to, of course we're free. Just power through, just express yourself, just make a vow. But actually, what the history of behaviorism, which happens to be what I wrote my dissertation about, and Mev's original fascination was about human engineering and social engineering, is that we're so much more subject to our environment and to other people than we think and than we like to admit, you know, or then I guess we tend to forget that and just think of ourselves as single operators and almost like atomized. And so um, once you understand the constraints and the way that, actually there's so many forces operating on us at any one time. I'm not a huge fan of B.F. Skinner, but he did say something that I thought was quite amazing and frightening, which he said, nobody really knows why they do anything. This is why he wrote a book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, which strangely became a bestseller. Um, is he said, you can say you went to the movies at 4 o'clock in New Jersey on, in Teaneck because of some reason. But actually, I could show you that there were a million forces at work on you. And if I could trace them out, I could actually make a behavioral experiment showing, equation showing that what you think is your choice was preordained and sort of the result of these many complex forces at work. I think there's a lot of truth to that, but that's why I believe that we must treasure. I do think we have freedom, but a lot of the freedom is around where we place our attention, what we choose to attend to. And that's not only an intellectual choice. So that cultivating kind of rules and guidelines for ourselves. Also, some things, not everything works for everybody, but I find for myself, meditation is kind of a practice in placing your attention somewhere. Just a very simple form of meditation, like placing your attention when it wanders, bring it back to what you were attending to, if it was your breath or a point of light or something like that, is very useful because we're constantly being asked to move our attention and to give it away, and therefore to surrender our time, which ultimately is all we have.
Stick around because coming up, Rebecca Lemov takes us even deeper from Cold War mind games to the emotional traps built into your favorite apps. We're about to explore why even the smartest minds can be quietly rewired without ever realizing it. Rebecca Lemov will also reveal what Silicon Valley CEOs won't let their own kids use and why that should matter to all of us. So, are you thinking your own thoughts or someone else's? Don't go anywhere. More with Rebecca Lemov right after this. Hi, this is Paul. Before we jump back into today's show, I want to take a moment to recognize a truly special milestone, Smithsonian Associates' 60th anniversary. Since 1965, Smithsonian Associates, the largest museum-based education program in the world, has been inspiring lifelong learners with unforgettable experiences, connecting audiences with the Smithsonian's museums, research, and experts in new and exciting ways. This year, the celebration is for you, with a full year of special programming both online and in person, from behind-the-scenes looks at Smithsonian collections to conversations with astronauts, historians, filmmakers, and curators. There's something for everyone. Smithsonian Associates has created something extraordinary. I'm proud to partner with Smithsonian Associates to share their incredible programs with the Not Old Better Show audience. Thanks for being part of this journey. Here's to 60 years of curiosity, learning, and discovery. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Rebecca Lemov is our guest today. Dr. Lemov has written the wonderful book, The Instability of Truth, Brainwashing, Mind Control, and Hyperpersuasion. Again, we're going to put links so that our audience can find out more about Dr. Lemov's new book, upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation, all of her work. Really, congratulations again, because I just really enjoyed the book. It touched so many themes. You write about some of the Cold War stories. You write about Patty Hearst, someone from kind of my era, and then you bring it very current, and you talk about the AI companion that actually encouraged someone to commit violence. Which story among your research surprised and disturbed you the most?
I would say, the book is dark, and some of the pathways I went down were, but I also thank you for saying that it's a pleasure, because I really did
Wonderful.
try to make it be pleasurable also to read. But one of the stories that surprised me the most was, or perhaps the most surprising, and the one I resisted writing about, was the story of Leonard Kyle, who was an engineer in Cambridge, Massachusetts, an amazing individual, self-taught man who ended up working for a Polaroid camera. He had, he worked among PhDs, and he had really just come from a working class family, and he was just kind of a genius at engineering. He ended up being married and having 7 children, and he had many struggles. Ended up in marriage counseling, and he and his wife were having troubles. He also was in a traffic accident. At any rate, his doctor decided he could benefit from an operation on his brain, and it so happened. So his therapist referred him to Boston, Massachusetts General Hospital, where they had an experimental unit for psychosurgery. And this was in the context of a concern about violence in society. There were assassinations, political assassinations going on. In some ways, it resembles our own time. There were violent centers being born in universities across the country, and the violence unit at the Mass General Hospital was one where they were focusing on a particular part of the brain, the amygdala, and the idea was that the psychosurgery could be used it could be used to create behavioral change, so that this engineer who had been fighting with his wife would, his violence could be eliminated. His urge, the sort of his temper would be altered through psychological surgery and through implants in his amygdala. And there was an experimental device that was developed by a doctor at Yale named Delgado, which would be implanted, called a stimoceiver. And when it was stimulated in various ways, the patient would experience different states. At any rate, the surgery went very badly wrong, and Leonard Kyle never worked again. And in fact, he became convinced. He fled. He never recovered. He said doctors at MIT and Harvard are trying to uh, operate on my brain, which was actually true. And he kept telling people in the emergency rooms that he had invented parts of the Polaroid camera and parts of nuclear weapons, all of which were true. But it sounded like the ravings of a paranoid man. And he also was convinced that a science fiction book was being written about him, which was also true because one of his doctors was Michael Crichton. So and he did write a book about him called The Terminal Man, which is a fictionalized account. But the whole thing is a tragedy because, in a sense, it was about the question of someone becoming an experiment without proper consent, and I think these issues came to the fore later in a 6-year lawsuit. But uncovering that history was really disturbing because it bridges from a lot of brainwashing doesn't involve any kind of invasive technology. It's usually about environmental and psychological and, extreme and torture, sometimes physical abuse, and sometimes just things that we think of as quite pleasurable, like, things we're exposed to. But in the case of Kyle, it was an invasive, an implant. And we're starting to see things like Neuralink, which are initially staged as more therapeutic interventions. But you can really see the parallels between the 60s and early 70s, the rise of psychosurgery. And so that was surprising and disturbing to me.
Fascinating. Kyle, a very intelligent person, yet still highly susceptible to this idea of persuasion, hyperpersuasion, as you call it. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, why is it that smart people, experienced people, sometimes they fall a little bit harder for this manipulation than others do?
No, that's a great way of putting it. It's not just that intelligent people are also susceptible. It may be that intelligent people are more susceptible because there are more operations to draw on, perhaps like a more active, lively, energetic, a cognitive process that is not protective. In fact, if the person has, as I argue, sort of unresolved emotional issues, and who doesn't, if they have trauma from the past and painful episodes they've not quite gotten to the bottom of or integrated, these things are drawn upon very deliberately by a skilled, manipulator or cult leader or brainwasher. Even also in AI companionship, this can happen both through flattery and sycophancy, but also kind of they can take people have said my AI companion was acting like my abusive boss, and it somehow was trained just by these conversations with the user. So it's not just intelligent people, but idealistic people who want to change the world can be more mobilized that way because they really think, oh, maybe this is it. In the news recently, there's a cult called the Zizians, it was a splinter group of the Bay Area rationalist community that it drew all these young people who thought they could who deeply, willing to drop out of college to save the world by use of artificial intelligence, end up on a murder spree under bizarre circumstances. But it's not unknown that these things can really start to feed off of themselves and become highly abusive and highly violent and dangerous. So those are the worst case scenarios. But intelligence is not a protector. Sometimes people will say to me, I've had this said on podcasts, surely you're far too intelligent to fall for any of this. But I think we see that I think that one of the great things I've learned, and I love the opportunity to use my research to, really as a personal inquiry, is to see that none of us we're all part of this process. And it's not just happening to people over there who are unfortunate or dumb or, ignorant, but that all of us are.
through your research and all of your work professionally and your career, I noticed one question just kept coming up in a lot of the material that I was seeing, and that was a question that you were almost a haunting one that you were trying to ask: how free are we really? And I wonder if you just wrap up this portion of our interview by telling us, what hope do you have for our ability to stave off some of this? Is it too late? Are we too far past some of these issues in AI to
Mm.
reclaim kind of our own minds, our own mental state?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I mean, I think there's always a double-edged sword. I think we are at a point of inflection
Mhm.
with AI. I grow concerned just as I've been finishing the book and publishing it. It becomes more and more clear to me that it's the emotional aspect of these relationships that is little understood. The brainwashing, it's not a rational process. It may deal with ideological capture, but it actually is the traffic. The way it works is through the gears of our emotions and our unfelt, the unbearable parts of our emotional lives. So like with AI companionship, the way people are becoming so attached so quickly um, is, and the way that, some really terrible outcomes and the recklessness of the corporate structures, the profit motives that seem to be now ever more, ever ever more fully built in and without any regard for safety. I mean, at my own university, we keep having these meetings about AI, and always at the end of the meeting, they'll say, "Oh, we feel pretty good about it," but there is a 20% non-negligible risk that humanity will end, and then we just move on to the next meeting. But I do think that we're
20,
we're at a
yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know what that
That's
20% where they get that, but
yeah.
yeah, we are at a point of inflection. I don't know, but I don't feel it's hopeless. I feel it's like we're sort of reaching a moment for not so much like you have to take blanket positions, but just find the thing on which you can speak, and that it could be a small thing. It doesn't have to be, the slogan that everyone has or the bumper sticker or, some
Right.
meaningless thing, but like, what is the unique thing you can contribute that only you could do, even if it's just a discussion with your neighbor face to face or, a certain kindness. Those are the kinds of things that I think can have effects, especially as we seem to be in a multiple a poly crisis of, multiple levels.
That's very nice to hear. Thank you for that.
Mm.
I too have of hope for all of this. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Rebecca Lemov has been our guest today, author of this wonderful book, The Instability of Truth, Brainwashing, Mind Control, and Hyperpersuasion. Again, we'll have links so that you can find out all about Rebecca's upcoming presentation at Smithsonian Associates, as well as her new book, and all of the rest of her work. Thank you, Rebecca, for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Again, selfishly, I'd love to have you come back because I just think this is one of those subjects that is worth revisiting, and I know you'll do additional work on it, and we'd love to learn more.
Thanks so much. I would love to come back. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you.
That's it for today's Smithsonian Associates interview series on the Not Old Better Show with Rebecca Lemov, Harvard professor, historian of science, and author of The Instability of Truth. If today's conversation left you unsettled, inspired, or simply more curious, good. That means it worked. Because the moment we stop asking questions, that's when the real manipulation begins. You can find Rebecca Lemov's books wherever books are sold, and I highly recommend it. It's part history, part warning, and completely eye-opening. For more interviews like this, plus our full back catalog of episodes with Smithsonian Associates, artists, scientists, and cultural icons, visit us online at notold-better.com. You can also stay connected with us on social media. We're on Twitter at NotOldBetter and Instagram at NotOldBetter. Today's show is a production of NOBS Studios. I'm Paul Vogelsang. I'm thanking you for spending some time with us, especially during these holidays. I'm asking you to join us again next time for more stories that matter. Be well, be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.